In the late 1980s, stand-up comedian Jerry Seinfeld teamed up with comedy writer Larry David, who had been working for Saturday Night Live, to present a sitcom for American television network NBC, where Jerry would play himself, a New York stand-up comedian, in a fictional world. The show would be written based around the writers Jerry and Larry's personal experiences on an episode-to-episode basis, and it went on to run for 9 seasons and became one of the most famous, influential, and successful TV shows of all time. In Season 4 Seinfeld, a season-long arc was introduced that had Jerry and his friends pitching a sitcom idea to NBC. It was an incredibly meta storyline. It wasn't the first in history. 90s TV show Saved by the Bell and Moonlighting from the 80s would break the fourth wall and make meta references. But Seinfeld being a show made by and starring a comedian playing himself that was now telling a story about the main characters making a show for NBC, the network the show is on, and then coming up with ideas for episodes that are in themselves ideas that the writers of Seinfeld already came up with for those characters, it was mind-blowingly meta in such a fresh and admirable way. It was incredibly interesting and funny, and most importantly, it worked for the tone of the show. There is a way to do meta material correctly. Just because something gets meta doesn't make it bad. However, we gotta talk about The Matrix Resurrections. I don't hate this movie. I don't like it, that's for sure, but it's not as simple as saying love or hate to me, mainly because there were stretches of the movie I found myself enjoying. Not many, but a few. I'll admit to not liking the first act of the movie at all, but there were moments in the middle and final act where I found myself saying, okay, maybe we're getting somewhere. It didn't last long, 15 minutes or so, and suddenly we're falling flat on our face again. When it was announced that they were making a 4th Matrix film, I was quite weary of the idea. A friend asked if I was excited, and he looked excited himself. I said, no, of course not. They already ruined RoboCop, Ghostbusters, Total Recall, they ruined Alien twice, they ruined Terminator 4 times, Star Wars is a disaster, I've had to suffer through Silent Hill and Resident Evil movies. Can't they just leave things alone, please? I don't even like the Matrix sequels that much. I like parts of them, I like some of their ideas and lore, but as movies, as stories, I don't find them very entertaining or necessary. Why would I want another one? Then the trailer came out, and I thought, oh, okay, it looks kinda interesting. The main draw for me was that Neo looked vulnerable again. That's one of my main issues with the action scenes of the sequels, especially Reloaded. Neo is so overpowered and emotionless that the action scenes ring hollow. Check out my video on that if you want. In the Resurrections trailer, Neo looks human again. That was enough to get me interested, because maybe there's a new emotionally gripping journey for him, and maybe there's some intense action where we actually fear for his safety. I went to see the movie with tempered expectations. I didn't know what I was walking into. I stayed away from most of the promotional material. The movie ended up being very up and down for me, more down than up, and by the end I was in a bit of shock, but we'll get to the ending later. Similar to The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions, this movie is an unnecessary sequel that fails to capture what the original did so well. But where the sequels spiraled out of control with their philosophizing and obsession with its own lore, The Matrix Resurrections drowns in its insistence of being meta, its poor execution of action, and its lack of stakes. If you've seen the movie, you know how off-putting the first act is. Neo is now Thomas Anderson again in this new Matrix that has arisen after the peace deal brokered at the end of the last film. He's responsible for a series of massively successful video games called The Matrix. A trilogy actually, just like the movies. This is the first thing that completely took me out of the movie. I'm supposed to believe that Neo, now Thomas Anderson, made a trilogy of video games that line up with the trilogy of Matrix movies that we, the audience, saw 20 years ago, telling the exact events in the same way that we saw them? I don't think that makes sense. Life isn't a series of stories that we cut up like that. Life is a linear progression of time. Matrix 1, 2, and 3 aren't entirely connected stories temporally. There are things that happen in between moments of those movies that we don't see. We know this because of the Animatrix, where we get to see the events that happened before Matrix Reloaded but after the original. The history of these events spans years. They've only been cut up into a neat set of 3 films totaling 6 to 7 hours because that's how we as an audience need to digest the story. We can't witness this story in real time because it would take years to do so. So the idea that Neo has taken years of experience and cut it down into the exact movie trilogy that we saw is so implausible, it's preposterous. I would have believed it way more if he'd started a line of comics, where he's been putting out hundreds of issues over the years. It would have been a lot more interesting too. But we can't have that, because the actual logic and quality of the story is not the priority here. The priority is meta-commentary, which is where the movie falls apart. Neo is not Neo in this movie. Neo is a stand-in for director Lana Wachowski. He's there to represent what she has to say. Or, if not exactly that, he's at the very least a representation of storytellers and directors in general, in this corporate world of cynical cash grab sequels. Now, I'm not saying that it's by definition wrong to have writers represent themselves in their work. It's probably hard to write protagonists that don't reflect yourself in at least some ways, and you can easily make the comparison to the original Matrix, where Neo's struggles with understanding the world and finding his true potential are similar to the Wachowskis' own personal journeys, whether they be trying to find their way in the world as young filmmakers, dealing with difficult and dishonest relationships and growing up, coming to terms with living in an unequal capitalist society, or their eventual transformations when it comes to their gender identity. You can see it however you want, and that's the beauty of it. The Matrix was just a good movie, okay? It was a really fucking good movie. Yes, it had some interesting themes in it about what reality is. Are we slaves to some grander system? Is there such a thing as fate? Do we have free will? Is ignorance better than knowing the horrible truth? That stuff is all great and fun to talk about around the Denny's table after you see The Matrix with your friends when you're 15. But it was the journey of the character and excellent execution of filmmaking that made The Matrix so enjoyable to watch in the first place. It's why so many people ended up talking about the concepts present in the film. The philosophical aspects and the social commentary aspects were there, but they served a greater personal story centered around Neo discovering himself. You could change all the lore and philosophy set at 1,000 years in the past in feudalistic societies in Europe, and you could tell the same kind of character story. The rest is window dressing. It's very pretty and interesting window dressing, with some awesome ideas worthy of exploring, but at the core it's just a solid story, brilliantly told, with some amazing action here and there. Understanding or agreeing with the message or themes of The Matrix wasn't integral to enjoying the movie overall, because it was just a good movie. The Matrix Resurrections is the polar opposite of that. It is only enjoyable through its messages and themes, because as a movie or a continuation of the Matrix universe, it's not very good. That being said, understanding the director's perspective can enhance the experience of watching a movie. My favorite movie of all time is RoboCop, the 1987 classic. It's a film loaded with satire of American culture, something it's greatly remembered for. But the clever and funny satire wouldn't mean anything if the movie itself weren't great on its own. Understanding director Paul Verhoeven's perspective as a cynical Dutch filmmaker directing an American action movie definitely adds to my appreciation of the movie overall. But I wouldn't care about it if RoboCop were not just a solid fucking movie filled with compelling characters, gripping drama, exciting action, beautiful cinematography, immaculate editing, etc. The opening 40 minutes of The Matrix Resurrections is entirely about being meta and commenting on our real-world Hollywood's obsession with making sequels and reboots, depending on audience nostalgia to make their profits, creating a world devoid of new and original ideas. It is only that. And that's why it fails. Tonally, it's all over the place. At times, it plays out like an SNL sketch. You're just waiting for the laugh track to make an appearance.
People want us up in their gray space, switching their synaptic. What the hell is going on here? Light on.
Allow me to sum up our goal in a single word. Bullet time. Bullet time.
That's 2 words.
We're subjected to scene after scene of unbelievable levels of cringe, as we watch non-characters spew garbage from their mouths that represents all the shallow corporate expectations of a fourth Matrix movie, here talked about as a fourth Matrix game. We have dude bros obsessing over bullet time, pretentious hipsters talking about how the ideas have to mindfuck you, as Neo sits there horrified by the disgusting marketing discussion surrounding his art. It's obvious to the level of being uncomfortable to watch. I wouldn't have been surprised if they'd included someone talking about Matrix NFTs. Neo's therapist, who we later discover is the program that's responsible for this new Matrix, is talking to him about the pressure he feels about revisiting the Matrix again. His boss, who is actually the new Agent Smith, played poorly by a new actor, actually mentions Warner Brothers, the real-life company that owns the Matrix IP, and says they're going ahead with a new Matrix movie whether Lana wanted to direct it or not, and that she feels like she's doing this out of some sense of protective obligation instead of passion. That might not entirely be the case, but if it isn't, why put that in the movie? Did she not feel like this, and it's just a general statement about the industry? How are we supposed to know? Due to all of this, it's impossible to take the movie seriously on any level. It's been made crystal clear that this is a movie that shouldn't even exist and is not being made from a place of sincerity. So how can any of its character moments, story elements, or lore be accepted by the audience? Are we to believe that only part of the movie is a farce? It makes more sense to believe the entire thing is. We're literally being shown scenes from the original movies. New Morpheus is talking about making callbacks to the original and mentioning how satisfying nostalgia is.
Nothing comforts anxiety like little nostalgia.
And whether or not you think that's an interesting angle for this movie to take, and there's an argument to say that it is, it leads to a movie that can't actually present a sincere story because it's impossible to not think that the creator of this movie is bullshitting you. And am I missing something here? Bugs says the machines have been hiding Neo, so they haven't been able to find him in the 60 years since the last movie. Neo says there's no way he's been hidden. He's been working at a company making video games called The Matrix under the name Thomas Anderson, so he should have been really easy to find, right? Well, Bugs says they've been tracking that company for years, screening anyone with the name Thomas Anderson. Since Neo has been appearing with a different face all this time, they couldn't find him. She says,
"What we didn't understand was that they could alter your DSI. This is how you look to yourself. Somehow they were able to alter your DSI loop. And this is how everyone else sees you."
And I'm just here thinking, what? It never occurred to you that maybe the machines were changing Neo's appearance? They made the goddamn Matrix. They can do pretty much anything. Even still, how is a man with the name Thomas Anderson, who's working at a company making games called The Matrix, and who knows about all the events of the past 3 movies, how is he not your prime suspect? Just because he has a different face? Who else could it be? You've known about this guy for years and you never thought to act on it just because he looks different? It's obviously him. When Neo is finally freed and brought to the human city of Io, there are some legitimately interesting concepts presented. Concepts that would make for an actual Matrix sequel that could serve as an entertaining and interesting expansion of the Matrix universe. The civil war in the machine city after the peace agreement and energy shortage, the exodus of machines that want a different way of life and end up working with humans to create a hybrid society, humanity learning to live at peace with machines for the sake of their own survival, the development of agriculture based on replicating code from the Matrix. I mean, they're judging the authenticity of a real-world strawberry's taste based on how it tasted inside the Matrix. But maybe that's not how strawberries are supposed to taste, right? Like Mouse said in the first movie.
How do the machines really know what tasty wheat tasted like, huh?
And there's more stuff. The idea of a new Matrix being built on humanity's constant state of paranoia and disinformation, people living in their own realities, and that it keeps them more connected to the Matrix than ever before and generates more power. It's a strong concept, and an appropriate evolution of the first movie, which had themes of society being kept in control for the benefit of the overlords. Some may see it as too much, or even as a personal attack on their own ideology, but it's certainly in line with what was established in the first film, being relevant to its time, and honestly pretty accurate given the way things are right now. There's good stuff here, if they actually wanted to tell a good Matrix story. But the film is so much more concerned with telling you how much smarter it is than you, and making meta statements about its own existence and the state of Hollywood, that it comes across like an elitist parody, which makes the actually good Matrix world ideas incredibly frustrating, because they care less about good storytelling and more about feeling superior to the audience and the filmmaking industry. It's frustrating because they're saying, hey, we do actually have some good workable ideas for Matrix sequels, but we're not going to give them to you because the studio wants us to rehash the originals. So fuck it, we're going to make it a parody. The idea of a machine city civil war and machines working with humans is an idea so good it could be its own movie. You don't need Neo, Trinity, and Morpheus to tell good stories in the world. The Animatrix has some of the best Matrix stories you could ask for, and they largely don't feature the main cast. You could make that movie, but either they don't want to, or they can't, so they just fuck around and instead use the property as a soapbox for their own agendas. And again, I'm not saying that having an agenda in storytelling is bad. Many great stories are told in a way that delivers a message based on the author's personal beliefs or ideology, but they're told in a way that is so good that the story stands on its own. The Matrix Resurrections doesn't do that. So after a very difficult opening act, for like 15 to 20 minutes I was starting to enjoy the movie. I thought we were done with the meta-commentary intro, and I was able to forgive a bad action scene that looks like it came from a TV show instead of a $200 million movie. For a while, I was just happy to feel like I was finally getting an idea of where the movie was going. We see human society is evolving, we learn there are people who actually study Neo's history and are experts of knowledge based on his life. Wow, that's interesting. There's new technology that allows programs to enter the real world with these new digital body things. It's pretty cool. We see machines that work alongside humans. They're way too cute, which feels like another meta thing, making fun of cute characters in reboots made to sell toys. But I can let it slide if we're going somewhere.
Mojo rising.
Things were looking good for a bit. But as soon as we dive back into the Matrix, things go downhill very quickly. Neo and the ragtag group of forgettable side characters, led by Bugs, yes, a character named Bugs, in a movie made by Warner Brothers, as if you needed any other reason to not take any of this seriously, they go on a mission trying to get Trinity, because this entire movie's plot is, hey, we gotta free Neo, because, well, we don't actually have any big plan right now or any stakes. We just want to free him. And then they're gonna go free Trinity because Neo wants to free Trinity. And that's the whole plot. Bugs wanted to free Neo so they can free more people with his help, but is that really it? Is there no sense of pressure? Has something happened back on Io that's so serious that these new heroes think it's worth the risk of going in to get Neo? No? Nothing? What are they trying to do? The machine city isn't attacking the human city. Wouldn't freeing Neo immediately be seen as an act of war? You're gonna do something that could screw up the entire Matrix and jeopardize their power supply? Is Io really ready to go through this again? I think not. So the plot of the movie makes no sense and isn't remotely interesting, but whatever, Neo and Trinity are still characters that I love, and I want to see Trinity free so they can be together. I do. So I'm still kinda invested in the story. But not much, because like I said, the entire movie has been sabotaged by meta scenes where they make it clear they don't even want to be making this movie. And hey, it's an action movie, right? At least there's gonna be some awesome Oh, no, not really. The action in Matrix Resurrections just kinda happens. People are jumping off walls, shooting guns. Nothing has much weight to it. There should have been some new action concepts introduced. I'm just speaking off the top of my head, but what if people figured out how to bend the Matrix so they could punch through a wall and their hand comes out from the floor? Some kind of reality-bending upgrade to their fighting abilities. Why not? They're already opening portals through doors and mirrors instead of having to use phone lines. Get creative with it. Instead, what we get is a less impressive version of what the old movies did so well, and a bunch of blood. But blood alone doesn't make for good action. You need choreography, direction, and editing. For reasons that completely escape me, they did not bring back Yen Wu Ping, sorry if I mispronounced that, as fight choreographer. or even someone else who's highly respected in the field. Instead, the action was choreographed by Lana Wachowski herself and her choreographer from Sense8. And that's why all the action in this movie feels so toothless. Punches don't feel like they're making contact, nothing really impresses. It's astonishing that they could screw up the action this much and make me wish that I was watching the fight scenes from the other Matrix sequels, fights that I don't really like that much. No one dies in this movie either, not a single character, villain or hero. Matrix 1 had a high death count. Dozer, Cypher, Switch, Mouse, APOC, all dead. Neo dies, technically, and if the sequels had never happened, you could have said Smith died too. Trinity dies in Matrix Reloaded, though she's brought back. The Keymaker dies, and in Revolutions, Neo dies again. Trinity dies again. Mifune or Mifune, he dies. Bane dies. Thousands of people die fighting to defend their city. But in Matrix Resurrections, the only deaths are from mindless hordes of zombies activated by the Swarm program. No one else. What are the consequences of any of this? What is all this for, and what's the cost? All we have here is a pack of no-names shooting guns to make cheap CG blood explosions in the heads of nameless civilians, killing dozens, if not hundreds of people that will sadly never get to live their lives or be freed. But they aren't shot by Neo, because he doesn't have a gun. Remember this scene?
Neo. No one has ever done anything like this.
That's why it's going to work.
Why did Neo bring guns to rescue Morpheus? Because he needed them to get the job done. It's dangerous inside the Matrix. Why did he not need guns in the sequels? Because in those movies, he was Superman. He could fly, he could stop bullets with his mind, he was above guns. In this movie, he's old, he's confused, he's out of shape, he doesn't know his powers. You're telling me that he's not going to insist on carrying firearms when they go into their mission to rescue Trinity? The guy knows how dangerous this is. He made 3 video games about what happened in the last movies. So the Merovingian shows up. Now, I've never been a big fan of the Merovingian scenes in the sequels. I'm not saying that I don't find the concept or character interesting. I think it's cool that there are programs living inside the Matrix enjoying wealth and privilege. Sure, I'm on board with that. The problem, as it often is execution. I find these scenes to be long, boring, talky, and ultimately irrelevant to the characters and what is actually happening in the story. It feels like a side quest in a video game where you can wander off the path for 20 minutes and learn about some optional interesting lore. Fine in a video game when you're controlling the pace, not in a movie when you need to be careful about your pacing and bloating your runtime. I get that he was the one holding the Keymaker, so they gotta interact with him. But if you're gonna introduce this high society of programs, make them integral to the story you're trying to tell. The Merovingian disappears for the rest of the remaining hour of Matrix Reloaded, and only briefly appears in the first act of Revolutions. Great idea, but nothing much came of it, other than a cool character, I guess. As Neo and the no-names look for Trinity, the Merovingian ambushes them. They're all dressed like they live on the streets, but not really. They don't actually look like homeless people, like this guy from the original movie, showing they do actually know how to get the look right. They look like people wearing homeless man Halloween costumes, and they jump in to fight everyone, hand to hand. No guns. They could have killed everyone right now with bazookas. It reminds me of the 100 Agent Smith fight in Reloaded, where Agent Smith, a guy that always carries a gun on him, charges in with his copies and starts a fucking fist fight with Superman. Why? Just to have a big fight scene with crazy choreography because that's what Matrix fans want, I guess? It's not exciting and it doesn't feel necessary. While being treated to one of the lamest fight scenes I've seen in years, something that looks like it's from a Power Rangers episode, the Merovingian reminds us that this is all a big joke anyway. He says,
We had style, we had conversation, not this beep, 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 beep act. Films, books, they were all better. Originality mattered. You gave us space, Zucker suck, and couch flicks, comedy, wiki pizzle shit.
When I heard that, it was almost a get up and walk out of the theater moment. Just like the mentioning of Warner Brothers, these real-world references do nothing but take us out of the experience. It's distracting. When I'm trying to finally get into the movie and the story and the action, he mentions Facebook and Wikipedia. And it's like, what the hell is going on here? The original Matrix took place in the 90s, but could you imagine Morpheus explaining the Matrix to Neo in the Red Pill scene and mentioning America Online, AT&T, and fucking Beanie Babies? And then he says that he's gonna see us in a sequel. It's so bad.
This is not over yet. I will sequel franchise spin-off.
Just like how Neo isn't Neo, he's Lana Wachowski or the embodiment of frustrated Hollywood storytellers, the Merovingian isn't actually the Merovingian. He too is Lana or storytellers, literally speaking about their disgust with the world as it is now with social media and all that. Not doing it through metaphor or good storytelling, but by screaming it at the audience like they're stupid. So Agent Smith shows up and he has a fight with Neo. It's okay sometimes. It's basically just a much weaker version of the original film's fight. And then Neo discovers he has force push powers, and that's all he needs to do for the rest of the movie basically. Agent Smith's presence is ultimately forgettable. It's hard to even know why he's here or what he wants. Neo's therapist is revealed to be the Analyst, the program that came up with the idea of resurrecting Neo and Trinity to build a new Matrix, and I think it works. Like I said earlier, I do like the ideas behind how he designed the Matrix to be more controlling and efficient, and I also like the idea that Neo and Trinity have a special bond that creates a power so unique that it assisted in making a better Matrix for the machines. I think that works very well in the Matrix universe. There's obviously something important about their connection. Trinity brought him back to life with a kiss, for God's sake. While I do like the actual Matrix story parts of this, it's also an incredibly obvious metaphor for a studio resurrecting the two heroes from a dead franchise, and using their nostalgic power to create a new product that will generate money. It's not an offensive metaphor because, like I said, I think it also works well inside the Matrix universe as a believable story direction. And if the rest of the movie had been balanced like that, it could have turned out much better. Like the original, it could have been a movie that was excellent on its own terms, but also served as a critique of the system we serve in our actual lives. The rest of the movie is hard for me to talk about. It just turns into a heist movie, basically. The machines want to reset the Matrix back to its previous version because it's been destabilized due to the freeing of Neo, but the Analyst has convinced them to wait because he's sure he can get Neo to rejoin the Matrix, because if he doesn't, Trinity will die. So now they gotta make a plan to go free Trinity and stall the Analyst until they can get the job done. They sneak into the area where the machines keep Neo, a plan that's ridiculous, and they send digital Morpheus in to start the process. Oh yeah, there's a digital form of Morpheus walking around that Neo created inside a computer program using old Matrix code. It's convoluted and messy and not explained well at all. If you want to figure all that out, I invite you to dig through the Reddit forums and enjoy people spinning all kinds of confusion. But they send digital Morpheus in, and he starts freeing Trinity in this apparently low security section of the Machine City where they keep their two most valuable assets that they've ever had under zero video surveillance or armed protection. Because if that were the case, the movie couldn't happen. Screenwriting. They work on freeing Trinity's body while Neo is trying to free Trinity's mind. Trinity realizes who she is, and they have a big action chase on her motorcycle where they drive away from zombie swarms that chase them on foot, and jump out windows making suicide bombs, which is actually pretty cool. I don't see how any of this is more effective than Agents though. Agents were incredibly lethal and efficient. Wouldn't just a handful of agents be more effective against a couple of people in their 50s who aren't at their full power potential? I don't know. Whatever. Neo and Trinity don't fight anyone after the coffee shop scene, or shoot anyone. They just drive around while Neo force pushes people. I actually had to run to the bathroom during this scene, and I came back when Neo and Trinity were already on the rooftop. I asked my friend what I missed, and he said, just more pushing powers, and I said, oh. No one important has died during the entire scene of thousands of crazy swarm zombies chasing 5 people. They lock them down in cars, they corner them, and they don't kill anyone. None of them have weapons. These things suck. An agent would have just shot him. So Neo blocks a bunch of bullets, and they head to the rooftop where there's a helicopter waiting, and he just blocks more bullets. There's another helicopter, and he throws a missile back at one of them, which is awesome. There's a big explosion, and the other helicopter just flies away, I guess? Can't blame him. If I saw a guy throw a missile with his hands, I'd be out. Trinity sees the sunrise and says it's so beautiful, like she did in Revolutions. I never liked that, by the way. I mean, I love the scene, actually seeing the sky for the first time. It's one of the best moments in the entire series, but it was enough for them to just see it and be awestruck by it, like we, the audience, were. It's a beautiful moment. We don't need Trinity to literally tell us it's beautiful. I think it would have been more powerful if neither of them had said anything. Yeah, it's a small gripe, but it always bugged me. And they kiss. It's nice. I love seeing these characters together, and I'm not gonna say I got no enjoyment out of seeing them together in this movie. I did, until this happened. Up until this point, I was kinda okay. Everything from the slow-mo Analyst exposition scene, to the heist planning, to the infiltration of the Machine City, to the coffee shop and the street action scene, I was settling in a little bit. The meta stuff seemed to be falling to the side, and it felt like I was just watching a generic action movie at that point. I was able to sit back and be like, okay, fine. We'll just enjoy some action scenes and get to the conclusion where Trinity wakes up in the real world and they're together again. They're building a life back in the city of Io. Maybe they start a family. No, they jump off a building and Trinity starts to fly. Trinity starts to fly. Well, not really. She's just hanging there. The wire effect is so bad. It just looks like Carrie-Anne Moss is dangling from a crane. I'm all for practical effects, but you gotta make an effort. If you're gonna sell me on the idea that Trinity can fly, you can't introduce it with a shot that looks comical. So Trinity can fly now because I don't know. Neo had powers because he was the anomaly, right? There was something special about him. His coming was prophesized, and his powers were not limited to the inside of the Matrix. The guy could explode machines with his mind in the real world too. He's super powerful because he's the one. Trinity is not the anomaly. But it's not that she's not special, she is. Her connection to Neo brought him back to life. The Oracle told her that she would fall in love with the One. It was her destiny, so there's obviously something special about their bond. It makes sense that the machines would use their special connection to build a new system by enslaving them. But she is not the One. By all of a sudden saying, hey, she can fly now too, and she's just as powerful as Neo, she's gonna do the ass kicking while Neo stands back watching his badass girlfriend do all the work, they're diminishing Neo's role in this entire franchise. And maybe you didn't feel this way, but to me, it feels like they're trying to apologize for Trinity not being equal to Neo in the other movies. Trinity was always one of, if not the most badass character in the entire trilogy, and in sci-fi history in general. She's not quite on the level of Ellen Ripley or Sarah Connor, but she's close. She's awesome. She doesn't need to be elevated to god status for the sake of making a statement about equality, which is what it feels like they're doing. The last scene of the movie drops a truckload of preachy meta bullshit about the Analyst knowing what people really want when he's really talking about us, the audience, as if we didn't get the point from the first 40 minutes of this movie. It's really bad. The serious tone of the final action scene is thrown out in favor of a slapstick, cringy scene of Trinity beating up on the Analyst while Neo grins about how kick-ass his girlfriend is. It's played for laughs. And then they fly away against the sunset with giant smiles on their faces, as the worst cover song of all time plays, solidifying the girl power theme of the ending by having a girl sing the Rage Against the Machine song from the end credits of the first movie. It's weak, it's poorly mixed, the vocals are way too out in front, especially for movie theater speakers, and the singer just does not have the vocal power or intensity to even come close to the original. If Zach De La Rocha were dead, he'd be spinning in his grave.
Hoover, he was a body remover. I'll give you a dose, but it could never come close to the range built up inside of me. Fist in the air in the land of hypocrisy. Wake up! Wake up!
I sank deep into my seat when it started playing. I cringed so hard that I left my body and I was stuck watching myself cringe, as my body turned into goo and seeped through the chair onto the floor, where I was later swept up by the underpaid custodial staff and thrown in the garbage. That ending, man, that last 5 minutes, did monumental damage to the movie. If it hadn't ended like that, I would have walked out saying, it was kinda all over the place and there was a lot I didn't like, but whatever, I guess by the end it was fine. Instead, they insisted on making me hate the movie with that awful ending. Everything from the moment Trinity starts flying to the last millisecond of that abysmal cover song was intolerable. It took me the rest of the night to shake it off and ultimately decide that I don't in fact hate this movie. I can't say it's absolutely terrible. I'm not gonna say it's trash. I can't. Not when it has ideas that I really like and parts where I was enjoying it. But I will say it's bad. I will say it's a mess. Close to being a disaster. It's condescending, it's patronizing, it's pretentious. I'm one to talk, huh? Shoutouts to all the Alien Isolation and Resident Evil Village fans out there. Yeah, the movie is all those things, but since it has a few ideas that I found valuable, and due to how fucking weird it is and how uniquely it dressed up its cash-grabby nature, there's something interesting about it. I wish it had never been made, but I also feel that way about the other sequels. It's bad, uniquely bad in very original ways, but it's not 2018's The Predator bad. It's just bad and disappointing. It was mostly a waste of time, it was unnecessary, and unasked for. What else can we ruin? Can we get a Back to the Future sequel maybe? Wait for Christopher Lloyd to die and then we can make a CG version of him? Add in a bunch of CG cute animals to sell toys? That would be great.